Thanks for staying with us on ABC-7 Extra Sunday. I'm Mark Ross. We're discussing the future of college athletics in light of an agreement signed earlier this month that allows student athletes to be paid by their university for playing a sport. My guest, UTEP head football coach Scotty Walden and UTEP Director of Athletics Jim Center. Coach Walden, in an article from our news partners at El Paso Inc., former UTEP basketball guard Omar Thomas was quoted as saying, "To be honest, if NIL was around back then, I would not have gone to UTEP. I was from the streets of Philadelphia. Getting a scholarship to go to school, that was one thing, but getting a chance to make a lot of money would have dictated where I signed." So what does this mean for you in terms of recruiting?
Yeah, well, it's a phenomenal example you give. I'll think I was speaking with an alum not too long ago, a famous alum of ours in football, and this, a similar sentiment was made. And Jim and I talked about this, and I think you're going to see this in Group of Five. The hardest thing is the records we have at UTEP. Think about the statistical records. Like for us to have a young man to go 4 years in our program and have an opportunity to, be in the Hall of Fame or be drafted out of UTEP or to break statistical records, those numbers honestly might go down because if we have a really good player. Like you look at Kyron Duhan, who we had last year. 6 figures at Oklahoma State after one great season, with us here at UTEP, so it affects recruiting in a massive way. But I'll say this, I think that if you still have parameters on what you're looking for recruiting from a character standpoint, and you still continue to drive those home and you look for young men that, we know money's a deal. Like that's the reality of it. But when it's all about the material, it's all about the money, and it's all about those things, we've been able, in our recruiting classes to, beat people out that have bid higher for a young man because, they believe in our vision, they believe in El Paso, they believe in UTEP, and they believe they can thrive here. And I think ultimately young men, yes, they want to know that they're taken care of, but also they want to know that they can come to a place where they're going to get coached, they're going to get better, they're going to get pushed. And we have 100 NFL draft picks in our school's history. And I say that to recruits, and they look at me like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, we got 100 NFL draft picks in our school's history." So when a young man sees that and sees that I could be drafted here too and have an opportunity to play, because there's an opportunity to go to a higher level, right, get paid really well, but maybe a rotational guy, right? Or you can come to UTEP and be the guy, be compensated well, get a phenomenal education, be the next draft pick out of UTEP, and be the guy. And I think that's something that's attractive to recruits.
How does this agreement affect those athletes who have already committed to UTEP just recently? Coach Walden, you just recently signed Trayvon Tate from a Division II school. So how does that affect, have you already talked to him about NIL? Was he aware of NIL? What's going on in his case?
I think it's a case-by-case basis, and kind of to your question to Jim in the previous segment, the hardest thing to gauge when we're recruiting a young man is, what is the battle we're facing in terms of how much he's being offered by school X, because those numbers are just absolutely inflated and a lot of times false, and so then you get into these. It's almost like recruiting blind at times, and so I think the NCAA is striving to streamline that to where we have a more gauged, approach to that. But we talk about our resources. We talk about the Goldmine Collective, now the TAF, moving that in-house, and we have opted into revenue sharing as we go into the Mountain West Conference, and that we have a donor base that's hungry for a winner and a donor base that wants to see elite talent here in El Paso, and that we're committed to that. And I think young men can not only see the financial commitment you discussed with them, but they can see the $5 million locker room that we just built less than a year ago. They can see that we're putting $2 million into our visiting locker rooms, right now that we use for halftime underneath the scoreboard there. You can't tell me that this place isn't invested in building a winning culture and a winning program. And so I think when young men see that, they can read between the lines.
So, Mr. Center, what effect does NIL have, if any, on the number of programs that are offered by UTEP Athletics?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily directly tied to the number of programs. We have certain things that we have to do to be a member of the NCAA at the FBS Division I level. As an example, we have to have 16 sports. You're not going to play FBS football if you don't offer 16 sports. And they'll have to be fully funded at a minimum level. They can't exceed a maximum level. There's all these things, maximum number of contests, minimum number of contests, all these things are out there. The biggest challenge right now, to be quite honest with you, are the escalating costs, what you and I know is inflation, for everything from hotel rooms to meals to buses. It just goes on and on and on. That is putting a lot of pressure on us because revenues have got to be able to stay up with those expenses. Now, what we're really doing is saying, well, let's add this additional expense on that was unplanned, unbudgeted, right? And that is just another whole realm. For us to exist, we're going to have to go out and privately fundraise that money. The university doesn't say, oh gosh, let's give you some more money, Jim, so you could spend some money on NIL for the purchase of student athletes' name, image, and likeness. That is not how it works at UTEP, and it doesn't in the state of Texas because of Texas laws, right? So we've got to be better. We've got to get more people engaged and involved, and people's mindset got to shift. They have to understand. They always understood this idea that if you've got 10 scholarships and I get 5, I'm at a disadvantage. Well, it's the same concept. A scholarship used to be the same. The one you offered was the same one that I offered. It might cost differently at Stanford or Northwestern or Vanderbilt than it does at UTEP and UTSA in Texas. But it was still the same elements, right? Room, board, books, fees, tuition. Now, we can still offer those, but there's this other added element that is called name, image, and likeness in rev share.
And then you also have the challenge of trying to keep ticket prices reasonable for this market, you know, because I'm sure ticket revenue would play a part in paying for
Yes,
NIL.
Sir. Yeah, obviously every single revenue stream that we have, from sponsorships, concessions, licensing, trademark, parking, ticket revenue, donor revenue, we are squeezing every drop that we possibly can out of our efforts, and I think we're doing okay. For a Group 5 school, we're one of the higher self-generating revenue schools in the Group of 5. So we're doing well there, but we need more, and we're going to have to do more if we're going to be more successful, more competitive.
Now, you touched on this in the last segment, the College Sports Commission. What is that, and how will UTEP work with the commission?
Yeah, this is another whole entity that is coming up out of the ground. It basically has been formulated by the autonomous 4 or Power 5 conferences, and there's a whole lot we still don't know about it. There's a gentleman coming out of Major League Baseball by the name of Brian Seeley, who will be the commissioner of that, or actually I don't know his title. He might be president, whatever his title is.
I think he's commissioner.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I think so.
So he's going to be the person that's really meant to make sure that people are following all the rules associated with the House settlement, and there's a ton of them, and to ensure that if someone is going over the cap, that there's consequences to that. If someone or entities are not putting things in the NIL Go, which is the legitimate NIL portal that the NCAA has created along with the College Sports Commission. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. They're going to be doing the enforcement part of it, right? So the NCAA will still have a role in this, but these guys and this entity is really going to be the 800-pound gorilla, making sure that people follow the House settlement.
So some of the confusion has been cleared, but not all of it.
Not all of it. We're still waiting. There's a 49-page document of frequently asked questions. And every single time I read it, I'm just like, I have some more questions related to this. Because the devil is always in the detail, right? And there's nuances to all this. Everything from the roster caps to how the rev share model works, what can be in the rev share, and how can these new contracts be stated? How do they count against the rev share? I mean, it designated student athletes with roster caps. I could go on and on and on. We could talk for hours about this topic.
Jim Center, Coach Scotty Walden, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on ABC-7 Extra Sunday. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you for having us on.
And good luck this season.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
All right. And thank you for watching ABC-7 Extra Sunday. Coming up on next week's show, we'll have Sheriff Oscar Ugarte with us. He's going to discuss his first 6 months on the job. I'm Mark Ross. Stay safe, stay strong. I'll see you next Sunday night.